Okay, let's dive in. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Adam Greco, and I'm a product evangelist here at Amplitude. I've been in the digital analytics space for over 20 years, spent most of my time working in the Omniture slash Adobe Analytics world. I even wrote the book on Adobe Analytics, but I've been through hundreds of implementations of analytics and been with Amplitude for the last couple of years. Really excited today to talk about the convergence of marketing and product. I'm joined by Joe Christopher. So, Joe, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Joe Christopher. I'm the VP of Technology Solutions at BlastX Consulting. And while I've not quite been in the analytics space as long as Adam, I'm a few years behind. I'm just clocking in at 17 years, all those years at BlastX Consulting, where I've built our consulting practice, developed my own and our team's expertise across many different platforms. And today, in my role, I get to make our mark on clients that by helping them realize additional value from their analytics and MarTech platforms. And for those that are new to BlastX Consulting, we get to work with amazing clients to help our stakeholders become the rock stars of their organizations. And we do this by implementing, optimizing, leveraging analytics and MarTech stacks to improve and ultimately personalize the digital experience for their customers. And we have many great clients leveraging the analytics platform and getting a lot of value. And what I appreciate about Amplitude is really that the solid foundation and roots around product analytics and how the platform has evolved from there to address the topics that we're going to be discussing today. So great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. So you got lots of experience here, but Joe and I having been in the industry for a long time. And because of that, what we're going to do is talk about some of the changes that are happening in our industry. And I always like to start kind of in the past and kind of bring people up to speed because a lot of people are newer in the industry. And this idea of the convergence of marketing and product-led growth is something that has been coming up more and more. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why that is and give you some actionable steps on how you can kind of take steps in your organization to hit this trend head on. As we're going through the presentation, we want to try to keep this somewhat casual. If you have questions, pop them into the Q&A and we'll either try to handle them right there or most likely we'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to start by just going through a little bit of a history lesson of kind of where we've come from. So the way I got into the analytics world was from the marketing lens. So I spent much of my career in the marketing analytics space. And I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember before I was in the analytics space and in the marketing space, we had this world that I call kind of the madman world of marketing. And this is going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, where if you wanted to grow your business, the only real options that you had in the early days were to go to work with advertising agencies. And you would basically buy billboards or you do radio spots, classifieds, TV commercials. And it was a very analog approach to growth and marketing. But obviously, there were some really big wins, but there were also a lot of campaigns that were duds. All of us remember some of the biggest ad campaigns growing up, depending on your age, but there was a lot of really famous Apple ones. Even tobacco companies were famous for this, and then Nike with Michael Jordan. And the trend in the early days of marketing, when we weren't in this kind of new digital world, was that an ad agency or a marketing team would take these huge swings and they would maybe run a campaign every year. And they really didn't know how well the campaign was doing because there was no way to really measure it. Now you would do a campaign, and then if all of a sudden your stores were flooded with, customers, you would hope and kind of assume that it had to do with that campaign. And the best you could really do is just kind of, ballpark it and say, hey, we ran this campaign in June, we got lots of people in July. But it was very much an art versus a science. But of course, we then moved into the internet age. And this is kind of where I jumped into the marketing and analytics space, where everything became digital. And this started really with kind of banner ads, and Google's paid search was a huge driver for this. And this was a monumental shift for marketers. This was the first time that marketers could actually measure and see the direct impact of their marketing campaign. So if you bought a Google keyword, you could pick the words you wanted to buy and bid on. Then people would click, they would come to your website, and they would purchase. And it was kind of an amazing time because you could literally see I spent, $2 on this ad and I just made $30. So it was really easy to compute return on ad spend. And you could just keep analyzing the data and figuring out which of your display ads, which of your keywords were working. If you sent an email blast, you could measure how often people purchased or came back to your website. So it was really kind of fun time. But then obviously that accelerated because there were many more channels. Social media came out. People started using Twitter. Nowadays, you've got Instagram and TikTok. And all of this shift meant that using ad agencies, using traditional marketing methods really kind of died out. And all of the big famous ad agencies became digital agencies, and they started focusing on digital marketing. So between ad agencies and organizations, we then moved into what we call the Moneyball era. And for those, hopefully most of you are familiar with either the book or the movie of Moneyball. But the idea of Moneyball was tied to the baseball business, and it was that in the old days of baseball, you would have scouts who would spend massive amounts of money looking for these, home run hitters, great athletes, once in a generation baseball players, and they would scout them and basically use their gut and use their intuition to figure out which of the players that we should recruit and how much should we spend, how much of our budget should we allocate. And that's why some baseball players would get paid 20, $30 million a year. But over time, we started seeing a new trend, and this started in Oakland, where the coach of the Oakland Athletics basically said, we don't have the budget of a big market. We're going to look for players and use data to find the players that are diamonds in the rough, ones that may not hit all the home runs, but they get a lot of base hits and they get on base percentage is really high. And they were able to craft teams that were basically minimal budget, maximum runs output, maximum wins for the season. And this trend at first was really revolutionary, and a lot of the old guard of baseball really didn't like it. And I equate this to the advertising agencies who, when digital came about, they basically pushed back and said, listen, we know how to run big campaigns. We do them once a year. They're big, splashy TV spots. And it's very similar to the scouts who wanted to keep doing it the old way. But over time, every team kind of realized that using data and using this Moneyball approach was the future. And now pretty much every baseball team uses this mentality. And I think the movie and the book really kind of brought it to the forefront. But in a marketing sense, this has now been equivalent where all companies and ad agencies, growth marketers have become accustomed to not taking big swings, but doing small little things in order to optimize their ad spend, return on ad spend, and get the most either revenue, sales, orders, leads, depending on your business. And so for many years, this Moneyball approach was really profitable. And that's why you have a whole industry of people like SEO and paid search and growth marketers that came up. However, things never are boring in our industry, and things always change. And so one of the things that happened is over time, we started seeing new challenges to digital marketing. Joe's going to talk a little bit about this more later, but there was privacy concerns like GDPR came out. There's always this threat of cookies being deleted on mobile phones and websites. And a lot of people were basically clamoring as consumers saying, we really want you to give us personalized digital experiences. So if we click on a digital ad, we want to make sure we're brought to something that actually makes sense and is relevant to that ad. And even the search engines were tuned to make sure that content was relevant. But they wanted to have personalized experiences. But at the same time, they were saying, we don't want you to track us and we don't want you to store information about us. And so a lot of these trends have made it more difficult over time for growth marketers and digital marketers to get really good return on ad spend. Because if you think about it, if you don't have the ability to store cookies And if you're really not tracking everyone who, except the people who give you consent, it's hard to understand if the people who are clicking on your ads are clicking for the first time, the second time, the third time. And if you can't compute that, then it's really difficult for you to figure out return on ad spend. And then this also got complicated because one of the things that marketers learned over time with this new trend of digital advertising, digital marketing, is that as you spend money, you can definitely get results. So if you spend a lot of money, if let's say you're a B2B company, I used to work at Salesforce.com, and we would spend money on display ads and paid search, and we would get leads. We didn't know how optimized we were. That was the hardest part. But if we ever stopped spending on advertising, then that well of new leads would dry up. Now, maybe there'd be some people who maybe saw an ad that you did 3 months ago, remember you and come back. But in general, if you turn off the spigot of paid advertising, then you generally lose the future of people coming to you. And so there's no compounding effect when it comes to advertising. And this has been a big challenge because it means that you basically have to just keep paying every quarter to keep getting the same people coming back. And it's great for the advertising networks, and that's why many of them are now worth over like almost $1 trillion. But for us in the real world, this is annoying that we have to keep paying over and over. But of course, the next big change happened when the iPhone came out. This was a revolution where now, instead of people focusing on digital advertising to get people to websites, we now have basically websites in our pocket, which turned into apps. And it seemed like every business now had to have an app in order to run their business. And so in the old days, you had your analog business, then you had your website where you would kind of either market yourself or sell your services or products on the website. Now you have another thing that you have to work on. And this app revolution really was the last thing that drove the ultimate trend of digital transformation. And this is where pretty much every business moved from a world where they would do things face to face or physically in stores or branches to now the majority of the business starting to move online to either websites or predominantly apps. And in the beginning, basically websites and apps were just a channel. They were just a new way that you could sell your products and services. But now we're starting to see that that digital or online channel through website and app is actually, for many businesses, being the majority of the business that they're doing. And unfortunately, we all went through this awful COVID pandemic. But one of the kind of the side effects of the COVID pandemic is it really accelerated this digital transformation, and every business had to figure out how to get online really quickly and basically run their business under the assumption that they would never see their customers or never talk to them face to face. And so one of the other byproducts of this is that it's created new trends in the business and new business models. So for example, I was at a local mall a couple of weeks ago, and I was shocked to see that a retailer that had been there for years, H&M, basically just closed up shop and was gone and put up a big sign that said, hey, if you want to buy our products, you got to go online. To me, that was really jarring because that store had been there for such a long time. Another example is one of the clients we have at Amplitude is Peloton. And what's interesting is that Peloton is an amazing product, amazing service, and it really took off during the pandemic. But if you think about it, there's really not that much different about Peloton when it comes to being a standalone bike. I mean, we had bikes in the 1970s that my mom used to ride that had a big fan in the beginning in the front of it. And as you rode your bike, you just pedaled the fan. But I think what's really interesting about what made Peloton different is it wasn't the physical product. It wasn't the bike. It was actually the screen and the digital experience that you had that became so addictive. And it was really good at understanding your preferences, which classes you like to take, which instructors, which kind of music. And so in this case, we started to see a change in the industry where it wasn't just the physical product that helped you grow. It was actually the physical product plus the digital experience that goes with it. Another example is Uber. I travel a lot, and over the last probably 5 years, I would say that it's very rare that I get in a taxi or rent a car anymore. I basically use Uber or Lyft wherever I'm going. And this is something that only was possible because of the technology change of mobile apps. And you would never basically use a desktop computer and say, I'm going to be in my office and I'm going to go order an Uber and then run downstairs. It just doesn't work. It needs geolocation and it needs to be mobile and portable. But this has been a major change. So taxis and rent-a-car companies have suffered because of it. And one last example is banking. It used to be in the old days that if you wanted to grow, you had to just keep putting branches everywhere because most people would bank at the branch or physical location that was closest to their home. But nowadays, you don't even need to have branches. And there are banks that are out there now that don't even have physical branches. I personally have a son who's in college, and in college age, a lot of the kids are getting their first bank account. And I asked my son, I'm like, how do you all and your friends decide where to get your banks and the basic bank accounts? And they basically said, well, we just ask around our friends, and whichever one says that they really like the app that they use, that's the bank that they choose. And so digital and marketing are all becoming intertwined, and the app is becoming really the face of the business. And so if you bring all of this digital transformation together, one of the things that we've noticed with a lot of companies is that in the old days, they had their business, they had their physical products, they had their services. But now it's almost like everyone's job has doubled because now your website and your mobile app are the face of the business. And they become the biggest location, the biggest branch, the biggest store that you have. And so all of us now are under this pressure to not only manage the normal business we used to, but we are all in the digital business. We're all in the app and website business to make sure that we have the best possible experiences. Otherwise, our competitors are just one click away. So how does this impact kind of this marketing and product convergence? Well, what we're seeing is that marketing is still there. Marketing's never going to go away. It may change a little bit. It may be more on TikTok than it used to be in the newspaper. But what we're seeing is that marketing is there to basically let people know that you're out there, what your business does, what your value prop is. But more and more, we're seeing that it's the digital products that are actually keeping people there. And there needs to be some synergy between the marketing and the digital product. So, for example, you could have the best digital campaign in the world and you can get tons of users to your website or mobile app. But if they have a crappy experience on the mobile app or website, then they're not going to stay. And that means that basically you just spent a lot of marketing to drive people that you're not going to keep. And the same is the flip side works as well. If you have really awful marketing and you have but you may have the best website or best app in the world, but if no one finds it because you're not really good at marketing, then that doesn't work either. And so what we're starting to see is this convergence is that in the past, in many organizations, marketing and product were kind of siloed. And marketing's job was I am responsible for finding new customers one way or another, but once we find them, I'm done. You know, they go and use our physical or digital product and service, and that's not my job anymore. And then you've got the product team who is basically like, I'm in charge of building really good products, either physical or digital, and it's not really my problem how we find them. But that just doesn't work nowadays because customers don't really view the difference between marketing and product. They look at it as just one holistic customer experience. And they just want to know that if you promise something in marketing, that it's going to be delivered in the product. And when they use the product, they want to make sure that if they want to tell other people about it, or if there's other products you want to cross sell them, that it all kind of goes together. But because marketing and product have been in these different silos, there's been a bunch of different kind of negative ramifications, especially as it comes to the industry that we care about, which is analytics. And I'll give you an example. I call this phenomenon the Frankenstein analytics stack. And what happens at a lot of companies is you've got the marketing team who says, I'm going to use one particular analytics product to see how I'm finding people. That might be a Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. They might have another team, the product team, that says, I want to really understand how people are using our digital products. So they might use Amplitude, Mixpanel, Pendo, something like that. Then you might have a UX team that says, I want to understand the experience, how they're actually traversing the site. So they might use like a session replay tool and so on. And it's not uncommon for many businesses to have 4, 5, 6 different analytics tools on their website and within their mobile app. I think the most common thing I see is using a one analytics tool on the website and then a totally different one on the mobile app. And all of this is born out of the fact that we have these departmental silos. Now, depending on your budget, it could take different forms. So for example, if you don't have a lot of money, you might say, hey, for product analytics, I'm going to use Pendo. And for marketing analytics, I'll use GA. When Optimize was around, people would use Google Optimize. They might use Snowplow for data collection. And for free session replay, they might use Hotjar. If they have a little more money, there's other vendors that may have, a little bit more cost, maybe not super expensive. And then if you have tons of money, if you're in the enterprise, you might go to kind of some more robust companies that have more features. But it doesn't actually matter which vendors you're using. The problem is that when it comes to product analytics, marketing analytics, experimentation, CDP, and session replay, a lot of times you're using multiple vendors. And that can cause problems. The first problem that we see of this Frankenstein analytics stack is that, first of all, you have to integrate all these different products. It's not easy to be able to jump back and forth between the products, and a lot of times you have to actually pass data between them. In addition, it makes it really difficult to really understand that holistic experience. As we talked about earlier, we want to be able to have the marketing experience and then have the product experience and understand that full journey. But if you are using multiple different tools, it makes it really difficult, or you have to export all of that data into some like warehouse that you have. And it also means that every customer has a different profile in every analytics product. So it makes it really difficult for you to collect all of the information, get that 360-degree view of your customer. It also makes it difficult to build cohorts or segments of users. I want to look at people who did X on the website and then Y on the mobile app. Well, that becomes almost impossible if you're using different analytics products for different platforms. You also can't personalize experiences because you might have some information about their experience in one platform and then other information about their experience in another one. On the practical side, you've got to have people at your company that have to learn different products. And when do I use this analytics product? When do I use that other analytics product? Which I've worked for years in the analytics space. It's hard to get people to even learn how to use one analytics product, much less multiple ones. Obviously, you have to pay for multiple analytics products, and oftentimes you pay more if you're paying for multiple analytics products than one that does multiple things. You have to go through multiple procurement processes, which at big companies is a pain. And the worst of all is that oftentimes it leads to you fighting between different teams like marketing and product and UX, basically everyone thinking their data is right. And instead of actually using the data to be successful, you're actually arguing most of the time over what data is right. And I lived this firsthand when I was at Salesforce, because we had an experience at Salesforce where I was at the marketing team and my job was to drive people to the website, get them to fill out a form. And so my metric was cost per lead. But once they filled out the form, they ended up in a 30-day free trial of Salesforce. And the product team, they didn't really care about cost per lead. They just cared about how many people started a trial and got them to purchase. So what you see with these silos and using different technologies is that you sometimes have competing metrics. And so I could easily reduce my cost per lead by just getting students and people who were interested in learning about CRM and Salesforce, but probably had no budget to buy our products. And the product team would then be in trouble because they would get lots of people to their trial and none of them would purchase. And they didn't know if that was because we were sending the wrong people or because the trial just wasn't a good experience. And so when you have these silos, it becomes really problematic because you end up competing on metrics. And then oftentimes teams are starting to work against each other. And this has brought a new trend where a lot of companies are saying, how do we break down these silos between marketing and product and different teams? And one of the approaches we see people talk about is using North Star metrics. And the idea of a North Star metric is that you pick a metric that is beneficial, that goes up or down. It affects both teams or all of the teams equally. So you want to find something that's a higher level metric so that you don't have that metric competition. It's got to measure customer value, so you want to avoid vanity metrics. It has to be aligned to the company vision. And ideally, it's as closely as you can get to be tied to revenue, or if nothing else, kind of a leading indicator of revenue. But you also have to make sure that your North Star metric is realistic. You can't just make up numbers. It's got to be tied to some sort of real number. So these are just, it's a fire hose of information that I just kind of gave you, but just to kind of summarize, we've gone from this analog world of marketing to digital. Then that has brought with it this kind of paradox of personalization. People want personalized experiences, but it's hard with cookie deletion and privacy to do that. Marketing, advertising, and marketing spend doesn't scale. It doesn't have a compounding effect. So that becomes a challenge. If you stop spending, you stop getting customers or leads. Organizations are realizing that they basically digital apps, websites, and mobile apps are now the new face of the business, and it's almost doubled the workload. So we have to figure out, how do we get marketing and product to stop working in silos and start working together. They've got to have joint metrics so they work together, and they've got to ideally avoid having Frankenstein analytics stacks where they're just using way too many analytics tools, way too many data stacks. And a lot of companies are starting to look at, do we have the right metrics, or should we be looking at building North Star metrics? So just a quick history lesson of all of the things that have been happening and why we're starting to see a convergence of marketing and product and some of the challenges that we face. And now I'm going to turn it over to Joe so he can kind of go through some of the ways that we can address some of these challenges.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for the history lesson as well. It's fascinating. So, as Adam shared all of these digital analytics challenges, I want to share just how real these are. And one point that really resonated with me was a recent conversation that I had with a client that was they were using Google Analytics and they were using Amplitude. And the confusion between product and marketing teams and how metrics were defined, captured, communicated, it was bubbling up to executives and leading to mistrust in the data. And thankfully, we were able to consolidate to Amplitude as that single system and turn things around, restore trust in that data. But it just goes to show you about that connecting to what you were talking about, the Frankenstein analytics approach. So we'll now jump into the actionable steps that you can take to evolve from the Madman era and compete in the Moneyball era. And step one is to capture and optimize the acquisition. And first, you need to understand what percent of your growth comes from marketing. This can be done by leveraging digital analytics to track spend on advertising, digital advertising, and viewing how these marketing channels and campaigns, how they impact growth. And here we see a screenshot from Amplitude showing the campaign performance in Q1. Great thing about Amplitude, you can use that channel classifier feature to assign your traffic based on the rules and get that all configured up. And then by having that marketing channel data, you can then understand where customers are coming from, and then do things like compute return on ad spend as best as you can, given privacy constraints and so forth. And this screenshot is showing Amplitude's web analytics space. And so this is an interface that lets digital marketers easily see how their marketing efforts are performing. And you can see unique visitors, visits by channel or campaign, bounce rates, landing pages, time spent within your digital products. And as you approach marketing attribution, you need to step back and make sure that you avoid spending money to drive customers to that leaky bucket. And Adam talked a bit about this. And this is why it's so critical to have marketing and product teams working together in a coordinated effort and leveraging the same platform. So by seeing the experience from end to end, it builds the right customer experience and growth. So marketing teams they're great at quantifying the short-term impact of marketing efforts, such as conversion from a Google Ads campaign. But what's more difficult for marketing is to look at the long-term impact of campaigns, since this can take place over many months in a digital product. And so this misalignment, it's similar to what Adam spoke about earlier with the Salesforce example. The alignment on both the short-term and long-term marketing attribution, it's critical to drive sustainable growth. And so in this screenshot, we see that paid search is driving a significant amount of the users. And what's concerning, though, is that the percentage of power users that are converted eventually from this marketing channel is low. And so paid search is actually doing a poor job of driving power users who are retained. And this leads to an opportunity for collaboration between marketing and product team to optimize the marketing spend and drive the growth of those power users. And then once you capture and optimize the acquisition, the next area of focus in our Moneyball steps is to maximize customer data, which leads into the customer data and building profiles across the journey. And you need to understand how to unlock that customer identity. This is a critical step. And so a little bit of informational diagram here, but the customer profiles are built from all sorts of different data. And this wheel is a good representation of the categorization, the types of your data. And it's generally categorized in that either zero, first, second, and third party. First and third party data are the most discussed types. And there's a lot of buzz over the last few years about how third party cookie deprecation is happening. And just last week, Google reversed course on it being an imminent change and stated that they're going away from that approach. We can talk more about that later, perhaps. But the less discussed and ones are the zero and second party. So think of zero party as the data that a user, even an anonymous user, gives to a brand through a quiz or a preference center. And then second party data is someone else's first party data that's often obtained by working with a trusted party through like a data clean room. A common example of this that may connect is grocery loyalty programs where first party data is often sold about your behavior and monetized to CPG brands for use in their marketing. But for today, we're going to look at zero party and first party in more detail and how it builds out the customer profile. So a really great example of zero-party data is how Brooks, they make running shoes, a client of ours at BlastX Consulting, they leverage a shoe finder quiz to both, it gives direct value in getting you to the right shoe based on your foot attributes or your expected activities in these shoes. It also accelerates the shopping experience for the customer, increases satisfaction, and very importantly, it opens up personalization opportunities for Brooks. And so this collected data about your preference, it's helpful to personalize that experience both for anonymous and known customers. And the results are impressive with this. The shoe finder grew Brooks's average order value by 13%, conversion rate by 45%, and customer lifetime value by 175%. So leaning into that zero party data is very effective. Now, as you move from zero to first party, this is that customer data that's obtained from your direct relationship with a known customer. So first party data, it's of higher quality than that of third party. And third party data is, that's owned by an advertising network. And they often know the user, but you don't. So you end up paying multiple times to reach the same user since they own the relationship. And Adam spoke about that earlier. McDonald's is a great example here, where they push customers to use their mobile app and in-store kiosks instead of cashiers. And so what happens in this transaction is that there are incentives, perhaps free fries or ice cream, if you identify yourself to McDonald's. And this is an innovative way to engage and know your customer and develop that one-on-one relationship. And as a result, McDonald's doesn't have to spend as much on third-party advertisers to reach its customers. Once you have your zero and first-party data with as much known customer data as possible, you can then bring together all the touch points and tie them together with a unique customer ID. And to do so, this requires a platform, well beyond that of traditional digital analytics platforms like Google Analytics. It requires a platform that can ingest any data type of customer data and leverage a common identifier and sync it all across your platforms. So the Amplitude platform does this by leveraging an event-based model to pull in data across these sources. So such as like web, app, call center, voice of customer, point of sale retail, and so much more. And so what I love about Amplitude here is the flexibility in how you can bring this data together, whether it's directly from a specific source or from a data warehouse like Snowflake. And yet another option, though, is something that helps address a specific concern I hear from some of our customers. And they say, I already have data in Snowflake, and they have concerns about sending it yet to another location. So recently, Amplitude released their Snowflake native option. And this is a warehouse native version of Amplitude so that you can run reports in Amplitude without sending the data to Amplitude for ingestion. The data gets queried directly from your Snowflake instance. And this is the type of flexibility that I really do love about Amplitude and how they're just addressing the needs in the market and what we're hearing from our customers. So step 3 of our Moneyball process is leverage the digital analytics data to optimize products and experiences. And in this stage, your organization will determine, what digital behavior data it wants to collect, and you begin to analyze the data, likely across those different customer touch points that I mentioned. And by analyzing the customer journey, you get to see what customers are doing and identify opportunities for improvement. So for example, you may find a segment of users from a specific marketing campaign that are more likely to abandon midway through the journey. And through additional analysis, you may determine that the marketing campaign messaging is using a promotion that's maybe not reflective in the product page, causing increased abandonment. And this is an insight that becomes immediately actionable. So the organizations that are best at turning digital behavior into digital product insights and improvements are more likely to win in the long run. And as Adam covered earlier, in the old days, you'd have that face-to-face conversation with customers. You could read facial expressions, and that's how you would listen. But in the digitally transformed world, you listen by collecting and interpreting data. So for example, by building a conversion funnel for a specific process or flow, you begin to understand behavior that pinpoints where customers are struggling, and this then triggers taking action to improve the experience further. And an example of that is using session replay. And this is showing the session replay feature in Amplitude to let you watch how users are engaging with your web site or your app. And from this, you'll get deeper insights into behavior, motivation, struggles, all leading to those opportunities to make product improvements. And another example on this topic is combining the quantitative and qualitative data, such as with voice of customer data, survey data from your web and combining that with web and app. And so this opens up additional opportunities for segmentation, and I've seen success with it. So for example, I could quickly create a segment of users based on sentiment or quality rating, and then begin to watch their sessions or dive into their journeys. Step 4 is our next step, which is to continuously iterate through experimentation. And experimentation allows marketers and product teams to continuously try different messaging, in-app promotions, new product features. And great thing about digital is you can move quickly on this. You're not held by the constraints of physical advertising. And so this test that I'm showing on the screen here it's an anonymized mock-up of a recent real client experiment that we ran for an education company that lets you buy digital courses and go through a checkout experience. And remember, a few slides ago, I mentioned that when you see a significant drop off between steps, it's an opportunity to improve. And for this client, they were having more than a 50% drop off from cart. And there's some reasons behind that. And part of it's probably the necessity of creating a login or an account. And that can lead to some frustration. But when we looked at this a bit further and evaluate it, we saw that there could be a small, quick change that we could make. And this connects really well to the theme of Moneyball, of making those small incremental changes. And so what we did was we adjust the layout to match the user expectation and to align with how we read from left to right. We remove some unnecessary components, adjust the page title, clearly stating the purpose. And this was an incremental change that reduced abandonment and a 6% increase in purchases. Just a small, quick change here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. So those are awesome steps and tips that people can take. The next one that I want to cover is complementing marketing-led growth with product-led growth. So product-led growth has become a big trend, and we could do a whole webinar just on product-led growth. But for today, I just wanted to kind of use an example of, say, like Starbucks. Every organization has to determine, they have a finite budget. How much do they want to spend on marketing? How much do they want to spend on their digital products? And I think Starbucks is a good example of product-led growth. And the idea of product-led growth is that you invest more in your digital product than you had in the past and hope that your product actually gets you new customers and retains customers. So, for example, if you were the CEO of Starbucks and you had a choice of spending millions of dollars on, say, paid advertising or $1 million on your app, which would you spend? And in Starbucks' case, they decided to spend it on their app and use a product-led growth model. And product-led growth tends to follow this trend where you've got kind of something where people get curious about your digital product. And this is, you've probably seen this through products like Dropbox or Slack. But in the Starbucks example, it might be someone in a store being told, hey, you should download our Starbucks app. Here's a QR code. Then there's usually an aha moment that someone says, using this app does something for me that I couldn't get if I didn't have that app. So for example, instead of having to remember their coffee every time, they can save their copy. And then they get value by having things saved in the app. Maybe they can skip the line and order through the app and just walk in and pick up their coffee and go. But as always, people get busy and you've got to try to find a way to become part of their daily habit. So a lot of times you need additional triggers to say, hey, you got to keep using this app. And a lot of times, like in Starbucks, that might be a notification at your nearest store. Hey, go check out your favorite coffee is just a couple steps away. And once people get enough value and they build that into their habit, then that becomes the way they do business. And so, for example, like my wife is a coffee drinker and she probably spends 4 times as much at Starbucks now that she has the app. She can order it very easily, walk right in, skip the line, pick up her coffee and go. And once you get really good at this, then you might even become viral where people will say, hey, you got to go check out the Starbucks app. And then you start to grow organically. Or in the Starbucks case, you could have, say, a gift card where you give someone a gift card for Starbucks. But of course, they can only use it if they have the app. And then they start in this whole kind of flywheel again. So I think every company is starting to figure out, is there a way, or think about, is there a way that they could add product-led growth to their marketing efforts so that they have 2 different ways that they can get customers and retain them? I think the next step is really taking action on data through personalization and audience activation. Obviously, if we collect a lot of data about digital experiences, it doesn't do us any good if we don't take action on that data or do something that motivates people or provides better experiences. So, for example, personalization could be something as simple as I add things to the shopping cart, I don't purchase them, so I get an email that says, hey, you left things in the shopping cart, so you better go buy them. Or it could be something like, hey, I noticed that so-and-so had a bad experience when they were on the website or mobile app and that they called the call center. And they had a big conversation with someone at the call center. The call center marked them as an upset customer. So maybe the next time they come to your website or mobile app, you have kind of a personalized thing that says, hey, we're sorry that we messed up last time. Here's a coupon. Can we make it up to you? And those are the kinds of things where you could use data from both a marketing and product perspective to really improve the experience and show that you're listening to them and show that you care about them. And even though digital experiences aren't as personal as in-person ones, you could try to get as close as you can by personalizing. Another example is audience activation. So you have all of this data, you can build cohorts of users and say, I'm looking for people who did this on the website, but didn't do this in the mobile app. Build them in a cohort and then send that cohort either to your backend warehouse. You could send it to an email tool. You could send it to an advertising vendor. But there's lots of ways that you can take all of this data, take all the profile stuff that Joe talked about, and basically build profiles of users into cohorts and basically push them to the different channels that you have so that you're taking action on them. That could be through experimentation, could be through campaigns, and so on. So if you bring together all of these tips that we've talked about, there's really a lot that you have to think about. You have to start by understanding where are you getting your visitors from, where are you getting your customers from. You've got to optimize that marketing growth, your channels, your campaigns. Then you've got to work on optimizing that whole journey. Look at the data, look at the conversion funnels, look at the experiences. This is where people really dive into using our product Amplitude because this is what we excel at. You have to think about how do you optimize those digital experiences How do you make them better every week, every month? You want to have improvements that you're learning from the data, from your interactions. If possible, you might want to see, is there a way that you could add PLG? Is there something that you could do to have your product do some of the heavy lifting so that you don't always have to spend so much money on marketing and advertising? You also want to build that culture of experimentation that Joe talked about. You want to keep iterating. You want to keep trying new things, whether that's new features, new offers, new products, new things to get that product experience better and better. And then lastly, you want to turn that data into action, whether that's personalization or activating your users to try to upsell them, cross-sell them, retain them, and so on. So at the end of the day, hopefully that you learn in this session is that we are a long way away from the old Mad Men era of advertising, things being analog. And I don't think we're ever going back there. I don't see a world in which everyone is ditching their phones and websites and going back in person for everything. We are clearly in the Moneyball era. And if you want to succeed in the Moneyball era, you've got to think about how are you breaking down those silos between marketing and product? How are you using data behind your marketing and digital? Are you optimizing those full customer journeys? Are you building profiles with your zero-party data, first-party data, second-party data, third-party data? Are you building North Star metrics? Are you thinking about how you could be using PLG, personalizing, rapid experimentation, and activating your audiences? So there's a lot. It's a lot on our plate, but this is the future, and this is where we're seeing the most successful companies go, is to break down these silos and tackle all of these head on. So that's all the content that we have for today. I'll turn it over to see if we have any questions to dive into.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. And just before we see if we have questions, going back to that Starbucks example of investing in marketing or product as someone that racks up some major points in the Starbucks app and cut the line it with being able to use the mobile orders and so forth. My loyalty with Starbucks has definitely increased as they've improved their app and features. And so while we're thinking of questions, speaking again of Starbucks, I'd like to share an offer that just to continue this topic with me and have a conversation over coffee. So feel free to scan this QR code here to book some time with me, and I'll send you a $10 Starbucks gift card so we can enjoy some coffee or your favorite beverage together.
Awesome. So I don't know. So do we have any questions we could dive into?
Thank you both, gentlemen, for a great session. We do have a question. You mentioned Google's reversal on the third-party cookie depreciation. Does this mean that we should be focusing less on zero-party and first-party data?
Yeah, I'll take that one. This is top of mind, right? It just happened. I spoke briefly about this, and I actually think it's a good reason to focus even more on it. And the fear of third-party cookie deprecation, it's been dragged out over the years. But on the positive side, I see that many brands are reducing their reliance on what can be a really poor data source in some ways, and especially in comparison to zero, first, and second-party data that's proven to be much more accurate, versatile, and important to improving the digital experience. And so the reality is that you already have other browsers and Apple who's done away with third-party cookies. So the change is basically stuck midway while Google shifts its strategy really to appease publishers. And my advice is to lean in heavily into the customer experience and shore up your non-third-party data, continue on that road to orchestrate the best digital journeys. And if you do all this, your brand will be rewarded with improved acquisition, retention, adoption, and more.
Thank you. And we have one more question. What are some examples of typical metrics to measure success in a marketing and product combined world?
Yeah, I can take that. And I think it varies for every business and every type of company. But I think ultimately, you have to work with multiple teams and figure out what does long-term success look like. And a lot of times that means storyboarding out the entire customer experience. But I can give you a real world example from Amplitude ourselves. So we're a digital analytics company, and one of the metrics we used to track was how often were our customers doing queries or running reports in our tool. And you figured, hey, the more people run reports, the more loyal they'll be, the more value they're getting out. But we actually found out that that wasn't really a great correlator with long-term success with our product. And so we did a bunch more research and talked to companies and found out that the companies that were most successful with our products were ones where one person at the company was doing analysis and actually sharing it with other people. And when that happened, that sharing became really sticky, and that meant that more people used the product and we became much more valuable. And so we pivoted our own mindset and North Star metric to say, what we're going to do is track how many people share reports, multiple times during a week. And that became a much better indicator for us. But it only worked by basically bringing marketing and product together and looking at what were the sources of customers that we get who ultimately, in say like our free trial, are sharing with other colleagues. And those are the ones that ultimately bought our product. And that insight really changed the way we thought about building our product and even the features in our product, because we really wanted to focus more on features that guided people towards sharing. Well, I think we are at our time. So, Joe, thank you so much. It's awesome to have partners like BlastX who can help customers through all of these challenges that they're facing. And we're just really excited to be partnering with you and having Blast as an ally. So thank you so much for joining on this webinar. And thanks everyone for joining. Joe, I'll let you say a final goodbye.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate your time as well. And thank you to everyone that's attended. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.